think it's fair to say that we've had a series of great debates today, and this debate will be no different. Let me just pull up the topic of the debate today. So we're going to debate, can blockchain scale without sacrificing its values? This is the onboard the next billion versus the onboard the next million debate. And please welcome to the stage Remco Bloemen from WorldCoin, Vadim Kaliashkin from Zerion, and Kartik Talwar from ETH Global. And now is our chance to vote. So be it resolved, blockchain platforms should prioritize mainstream over crypto native users. And again, you can scan the QR code. I'll give it about 30 more seconds. Wow. A lot in the abstain category. I'd like to see that. We haven't really seen that before. Whoa. Wow. Spicy.
Wait until the billion shows up.
Anyone else?
We reached the million.
You can really move markets here if you want to. Okay, there we go. Ooh.
I don't see it.
Almost the same.
Wow. I love this. Okay. We have 8, 9. Last call. 9 in the agree category, 7 in the disagree, and 10 in the abstain. So you have a chance to really persuade some people here. So take it away.
Amazing. Well, I'm super excited for this debate, or discussion, or fight. We'll see which happens at the end of this. But the topic we're here to discuss is something that we've been thinking about and talking about for a lot of years, which is how do we bring more people into this space? Anytime a nascent technology comes up, you have to convince a lot of people to create that early group of believers, and they end up being the ones that get more and more people into this space through either their evangelism, through the products that they build, or just a version of the world that they think needs to exist, and they bring that on and show it to everybody else. We've seen these same waves happen for the internet, software as a service, computing in general, mobile especially, and as of recently, we've kind of seen AI and blockchains being the prevalent themes. And kind of going back to a lot more analogies that we've seen that I think will help us shape a bit of this debate is kind of going back to how we saw the internet change social behavior. We kind of saw different ways of how social media platforms got started. And even at that point, you had two different core groups where one believed that we should focus on building things specifically for a core group of people that care about a specific problem. And you saw the likes of different forums and really specific networks like Stack Overflow come up. And then the other side of that, you had arguments for let's build something for the masses so that anybody's grandma can use them. And that kind of got you to where Facebook is. And that's kind of what the discussion is. Should we actually build platforms for a specific set of core users and prioritize them for them first? Or we kind of build directly for the mainstream audience and think about what the trade-offs will be for all of those and get more people through that means directly by focusing on the large groups. So the two amazing panelists here are going to be taking different sides here. First up, we have Remco. And Remco has been in the trenches for over a decade working on open source software, especially building so many amazing things in crypto. And the side he's supporting is we got to focus on 1 billion users first and from day one. And one of the core things that I'll highlight without spoiling his core argument is when you kind of look at things like WhatsApp or Signal, they kind of made secure messaging and encrypted messaging a norm and are very good apps that have over 1 billion users, or if not a few hundred million on each side. And he believes that blockchain should follow a similar path, which makes sense from kind of how you think about building something for a good user base. The other side of it is Vadim, and he's taking the other side, which is we should focus on where we think things like worlds and telegrams of the worlds are, which is built for a very specific use case, for a very specific audience. It's great if they end up growing as that same profile of a user, but it should be meaningful to that user, not a catch-all for everybody in the space. And what we don't want to do is compromise on the values of the blockchain. I think that's kind of a core element of all of this. And I do want to wrap this up so I can give them the opportunity to do this thing. But the core argument here is that at the end of the day, we are a little bit over 10 years into this space, and we're at a point where we really got to see something that we can be proud of and show to the rest of the world that, hey, this is actually ready as tech. We saw this for the internet, and blockchain is at a point where we see these things are very close to being done, but and we have seen them actually even replace some businesses, especially in finance, but we haven't really gone the aha moment of this clicks with everybody. So with that, I want to open it up for Remco to make his opening argument for why we should focus on the billion users.
Thank you, Kartik. I like this quote. I think it's from Muhammad Ali, but it's definitely a boxing quote. Like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I think this is a very important principle in engineering as well. Like, you can have so many good ideas that you want to see in the world, but it isn't until you actually start implementing them in reality and at scale that you try to find, that you end up finding the flaws and the hidden assumptions in there that don't quite work out. And it's really important to get there early and get there fast so that you can learn and iterate. I've been in this space for, like Kartik said, more than 20 years now, and the thing that always hurts me is when I see a team that has an amazing idea, an amazing set of ideals, and they end up in this cycle where they just have a small niche group of users, a little in-crowd, and they keep iterating on this in-crowd, and they never manage to hit this amount of adoption where they can sustain themselves and when the project actually delivers what its original vision is to the wider world. For me, a very important example here is secure email. Email is a horribly insecure protocol still to this day. And there have been attempts, a big one is GNU PGP, to improve this situation. But this project never really took off, even though the technology and the ideas behind it are absolutely stellar. And the reason is that, well, I mean, probably none of you in the audience are using GNU PGP these days. And the reason is that they just haven't been able to transition the project into focusing on the non-natives to make it accessible. And this day, nearly everyone in this audience here is using secure communication, not through email, not through GNU BGP, but through things like Facebook's WhatsApp, which runs on the Signal protocol. And what Signal protocol did, that I think is a very important lesson, is they focused very hard on making it for the non-native user so that they can actually scale and bring a solution that the whole world can benefit from. And consequentially, you don't have to know what the double ratchet algorithm is in order to send a secure message, and you don't need to exchange long hexadecimal keys in order to add a friend in your contacts list. And this is a very important lesson for projects that want to build a large base of non-native users. Now, even if you don't want to reach a large base of non-native users, this is still an important thing to do, because this also benefits users that are part of the in-crowd, because it reduces the cognitive load of using the tool. It essentially creates a better user experience, and if you have a better user experience, your users are more empowered. They can do more complex things using the tools that are there. So even when scale is not your goal, you should still focus on making it friendly to people so that they don't have to think. They don't need to read the documentation. They don't need to read the source code, join the Discord, and ask a bunch of questions in order to understand how to know this. You should make things you're building such that you can use them without thinking. I think for blockchain, though, it is important that we focus on scale as well, because blockchain platforms provide a set of things that nearly every human needs, like financial primitives and so on. And it also stands for a set of values like transparency, trustlessness, permissionless, and kind of this quality I really admire where a couple of ambitious people in a garage can build the world's largest exchange, can build a betting market that outperforms all the traditional media, and who knows what they'll be able to build next. And the reason they can do it is because people have been building this tooling and making it accessible to others. And these blockchain values, I think, are not for a small audience. These are values that we should aim to have the whole world have access to. And in order to do that, we need to get very, very serious about solving the problems, solving the hard problems that non-native users face. We need to make it such that the average person on the street can use these crypto primitives without having to think hard about it.
Amazing. And we'll kind of go into the counter argument.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be on stage with people I share values with about blockchain and transparency and in general. So to your point about PGP, and it didn't take off, but you can still use PGP. So you have a possibility, you have a choice to use PGP. So technology is there, just not so many people care or should care about problems like privacy. Even before like encryption or HTTPS became into place, there was a war with like first crypto war about protocols privacy. I guess Netscape in the US was selling without encryption, and Netscape outside of US you can download with the built-in encryption. So it was a very tough time for security in general, but we ended up with having code as a freedom of speech argument that is still viable and was used with, let's say, Tornado Cash or in other cases. What I like on focusing on smaller audiences is that you can talk with people and understand their needs and make a precise tools to solve their needs. So let's say you can focus first on like degens, then it grows to some like altcoin traders, then it grows to people who trade NFT or collected NFTs via artists, then it comes down to more businesses start to use crypto. Eventually it comes down to more and more use cases happening, but to reach a use case where you have 1 billion users, you need to be like social media or messaging. So this is the only apps on the planet that reach that scale. And what we can offer them using like blockchain right now for social media scaling, it's still unsolved tasks. You can do in Telegram, probably the only example where there is almost 1 billion users. There is a wallet built in. You can send money to any Telegram user. You can store USDT. You can earn yield, and like this is the default wallet. So does it mean that Telegram is the largest crypto app on the planet, largest bank in the world or not? Or it's just still, because Ton as a blockchain and ecosystem like still 2-3 years behind like EVM or Solana. So, but I recently spoke to a lot of new founders who are coming into the space after 2022. And what I like about having conversation with them is that usually their story is, I came from this industry, let's say, invoice financing. I came from like ticketing and like organizing concerts. And I found a way how to use pieces of blockchain technology and Web3 technology to solve fraud, to solve cross-border payments, to solve a lot of problems, to be more efficient and cost-efficient, to have larger distribution. And I see these companies, they have product market fit of, let's say, 10 million users, 1 million business clients, but this is already a huge, so they can generate like hundreds of millions in revenue per year, and it can be like venture-sized businesses, and they will provide a lot of value to users. So I'd rather build for now and try to find how it works all together, because this is essentially one of our core values in Web3, that I like, that you have one wallet and then you can go to any website, any dApp, and there is your finances there, transactions there. Probably 1 billion barrier. Next is identity, which is your team working on. So we have a frontier here on solving big problems, because identity is like a very tough one to aggregate and like make it accessible, make it so you can show it on a border. If I can show WorldCoin on a border, I will be a very happy customer and user. And if I will be able to show my passport in Zerion or any other Web3 wallet, I will be even more happy. So let's see how it will evolve in the next 2-3 years, given we are now competing with, not within the bubble, but with other industries for efficiency and revenue and profit.
Amazing. Those were the two opening arguments, and I think what we want to do next is actually kind of dig deeper into both of these sides and see if we can actually have a fun debate here. I have a few things that I want to follow up on from both of what you said, and I'll kind of start with some quick definition checks. So we don't have to go too deep into this thing. I just want you to just quickly give me a very concise answer so that we can agree on making sure that we're on the same page. First thing I want to clarify with you is, are you saying that if some app that uses crypto has 100,000 or a million users, that is still considered mainstream? Is that a correct statement, or do you disagree with the definition of what mainstream is here?
I believe that if you have 10 million users, or from 10 million users to 100 million users, you're already mainstream. You're like solving.
What about 100,000 to a million as the range?
I guess it's a followers challenger. So to reach 1 million users is a big milestone, maybe a valley of death for many startups.
Great. Clarification for Remco. Is the argument here that anything that we build with this tech should be a product that gets to that distribution, or is it the simplification and the implementation that reaches the group is what counts?
I think there's two parts to it. I think making it accessible to non-natives is good for its own sake, even if your aim is not scale. But I don't think that every application should necessarily aim for scale. Like I could imagine that you want to have some niche social platform for deed and solidity auditors, for example. Then you target that user group. In the wallet space, I also imagine that there would be a lot of segmentation where people have different needs out of their wallet, and you would naturally create smaller and larger groups of user segments and have correspondingly larger and smaller projects to cater to them.
Okay, perfect. Those things are clarified, so let's get into the actual questions. A big piece of what you kind of talked about is that if you are focusing on the existing current problem for that current user, you get to preserve the values of that ecosystem and kind of the principles that you talked about and the shared kind of values that everybody has, whether it's the user or the founders of that team or just people who are in that category of being crypto. Is the goal here for you that as long as we keep the values the same, it's fine, whatever the limits are? Or do you believe that if you think that you made something super valuable and it can benefit a lot of users, which would be the case for 1 billion users, it's okay to compromise on the values because we get to make it mainstream because you have to make different trade-offs, and that's like not okay. Let's kind of see where we stand on this.
Okay, so I believe here is that there is a, let's say, gradient, so progressive decentralization, as we called it a few years back, that you can start fully centralized and solve a problem first. But if you want to provide like trustless transparency or trustless privacy or like permissionless access, like censorship resistance, like neutrality, so people can always access their money, let's say in case of wallets or assets, you should chase latest technologies to make it happen sooner, if you truly believe in values, and don't focus on other stuff, let's say profit optimization before you fulfilled your value promises as a brand.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Maybe the thing I want to ask you here from this is, you kind of gave the Signal example for WhatsApp, or I think of a Whisper protocol. In that analogy, yes, WhatsApp ended up being the product that made the encryption protocol mainstream. But the only way it got to that point was that the protocol was in development for many years until it got to a state that was ready. And the people behind Whisper did not actually ended up being the team to fully productize that to the main WhatsApp product. So in a way, are you sort of agreeing with the fact that we should perfect the things for a small group first, and it's okay that it stays that way because we are separating the definition of what's considered a billion user mainstream is different than the technology we're building, which doesn't have to necessarily hit that same group?
Yeah, it depends. You want to make sure that you do not compromise on things that are truly important. And it did take time to solve some of the hard problems that were there. It took a long time for Signal to have a good way to exchange contacts, for example, because doing this in a very privacy-preserving way was a hard, unsolved problem. But I would say here that focusing on the non-native users in large scale has a very strong focusing function. It will highlight what are the hard open problems here and what is sort of technical navel-gazery that is ultimately not very relevant in the grand scheme of things. And I would say I see too many projects getting stuck in the latter and doing a lot of R&D cycles on things that don't solve the hard problems that block adoption. And this is a natural thing that happens because when you don't see a way out of a hard problem, it's very hard to keep focused on it. And it's very tempting to go iterate on the areas where you see rapid progress. And I just want to encourage projects to not get into that fallacy and keep focusing on what actually brings the non-native adoption. The second thing is that right now in blockchains compared to where we were 3 years ago, like 3 years ago, for a lot of things, you had hard binary choices. Like either you do it on-chain and you can support maybe a couple hundred users, maybe like 1 transaction per second, or you have a central database, and there is no in between. And either you would have like data living on the user's wallet and only the user can do anything with it, but it can never leave the wallet, or you have a central database of user data, and there is no in between. But now we're at this stage where we have very performant client-side proving. And suddenly you can do all sorts of computation over user private data while that data can remain private. And similarly, we have very sophisticated layer 2 infrastructure now. So you can be anywhere on the spectrum, really, from being like on L1 Ethereum to being like on a S3 bucket data availability layer 4, and wherever you want to be. And you can play with these dials and come up with the solution that makes the most sense for the problem at hand, or even, and this should be honestly done more, is split the problem up. Some parts require hard privacy, and you want to absolutely use CK there. Some parts are a little bit less critical, and you want low latency, so maybe their TEEs make more sense. And the thing that is really enabling is that we now have this whole spectrum of solutions, which I would argue is a complete portfolio containing everything we need to really reach mass adoption.
But at the same time, that same portfolio is optimizing for a very specific use case for their own set of problems that they think are valuable, which are fundamentally capped on the potential audience. It only makes sense as a collective, but not on its own.
Individually, these implementations are not ready for production, and they definitely need a strong team to work on them, to bring them to adoption. Again, because scale reveals a lot of flaws that are not addressed. Like things run out of memory, things crash, and you need to make it horizontally scalable. It's actually, I find it very interesting and focusing too.
And new scale unlocks new problems, and that's exactly where you get the limits.
I actually think most of what we noticed at World is that most of the existing Ethereum ecosystem tooling breaks down around between 100,000 and 1 million users, and we had to in-house a lot of this and of course contribute back in order to make that work.
Amazing. Similarly, one of your arguments was you kind of talked about that focusing on the smaller user group is an equally viable strategy, and you kind of gave Telegram. The thing I want to point out is that Telegram is actually just about to hit 1 billion users, and effectively proves Remco's point, which is Telegram actually focused on accessibility and made a really, really nice application that is very easy to use for everybody, works across devices and platforms, and still integrates the end-to-end encryption with a big asterisk there for people who know, and effectively is directly building for the mainstream. You don't get to even hear about the things that Telegram does behind the scenes. You don't get to even see the same setups for the wallet that they have now. And the thing I'm curious about is like, well, do you not see that as a counter argument to your own argument versus supporting that Telegram actually is in the smaller group?
So we're talking here about like Web3 and blockchains. So even Telegram has all of it and millions of users and Telegram mini applications. Still, I talk to on-chain applications. They have DeFi layer. They have different games, on-chain games. They have more or less new, young ecosystem that people can onboard, but still adoption is not coming. People are not understanding why they need a crypto wallet. So despite having millions of users, actually active wallets, there is a meme inside Ton community that there is 2,000 really active wallets on Ton blockchain, and that's it with capital. The rest is like just dust or like some airdrops from Hamster.
But I think at the end of the day, the debate is about when you design and build for something, what is the audience that you're focusing on? And in the case of Telegram, any feature that they push has to be ready for a billion user scale. And this applies for their blockchain too. The Telegram Ton network is actually making a lot of these trade-offs on how they do consensus and data availability and just managing state. And they have to still design for that group where, like, if in a version of this next feature, half the people from Telegram move over to Ton, they need to be able to support that. And that means they had to design for the scale immediately. How do you kind of reconcile that and focusing on a core group there?
Well, so I would say it's a personal choice then. So I would prefer focusing on like concrete problems that like I can solve, talk with users as early as I can, because I don't know how long you at WorldCoin spent at that warp, but before it got to the first customers, probably it's been a while, and something then you can explore the world and find real problems, or you have a, let's say, cross-border payments startup. Then you can introduce smaller products like utility bills payments, rent payments in certain countries, all with stable coins, so you can grow your business organically and efficiently, while like sometimes bigger problems like communication. Who would race on a new messenger? Tell me who this crazy guy is. Like the last one was Farcaster, but they have different like vision, like, and they still need to build, but it's a lot of excitement, but still guys need to get through it. So we're yet to see, and it's very hard to get from Twitter and Telegram because it's like network effects there is so strong. So we need to have a stronger proposition to reach than we have right now. So I would say that 1 billion plus use case is like 2-3 years away.
Got it. That's fair. Remco, for kind of the arguments that you're making on designing for that scale, the two-part question that I have here is how kind of, or I guess, so one, kind of your personal opinion, and the second is like a possible future that we see all the time with these things. The question being, do you feel like when you design for that scale, you end up compromising on the values of the crypto ecosystem, whether it's largely decentralization and the ability to actually have a choice about what happens to that information? And the related second question is, as you can design for these things, it naturally makes it a lot harder for things to remain effectively as self-sovereign as possible. you kind of see a lot more of these corporate takeover behaviors. You see centralization of some form, whether it's decision-making on product to how you kind of talk about it and communicate it. How do you kind of see that, and do you see that as a problem when you're at that scale?
Not a problem, a challenge. And it's an interesting one. I was actually surprised by how little we had to compromise in order to reach this scale and even to do biometric-based uniqueness checks. It turns out that we actually already have all the tools we need to do this correctly and do this at scale and do this in an incredibly privacy-preserving way. And same goes for most of the infrastructure we have at World, where our users have self-custodial wallets and so on. Fully self-sovereign, you're right. It is much easier to organize things when there is a single cohesive organization versus you have, like, let's say there was not even an organization at all and you just had loose independent open source contributors trying to achieve this. That would be a near impossibility.
That's your
especially
PGP example.
The orb would not have happened if that was the case. Hardware requires people to be physically in one office for very obvious reasons. So that is, I think, where just this more startup style structure is very beneficial because it gives you this ability to do so. And then the question is, but does that mean it will always have to be such a more corporate, more central structure? And I don't think that is the case because kind of the forces of nature are in favor of putting the control on the user, because once you hand over control, you cannot take it back. It's there. Which also means you need to be careful and take this step very deliberately. There are parts that we will eventually have through an open, transparent DAO governance, but right now the DAO governance systems that are out there don't seem capable yet of handling the kind of decisions that are required there. But this is also on several levels where some of it is just decisions that impact users directly. Others are decisions on how do you organize the distributions of orb around the globe. And others are decisions on how do you manage the supply chain of parts for the orbs. And arguably, this latter category is not super relevant for the experience and the value that the users in the end have.
That's fair.
So there you can also take, like, what is important, where do you want to apply these principles very strictly, and where can you favor approaches that allow you to scale faster?
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. You're not compromising the value, you're actually making sure that certain things are remained core to their existing value prop, and you get to effectively finagle the rest. Similarly, maybe to see if there's a counterpoint to what Remco said, if the view here is that you get to talk to a small set of users and get feedback and make things really good for them, and be okay with not fully appealing to a bigger group, or knowing just, hey, this is a super promising way to think about solving a problem, and here's like 1 million people that are potential people that would like it, let's kind of stick to that, and we get to make it better for just that group, but not sort of aim immediately to go up to everybody. In that world, do you fear that the value that this tech is bringing can get lost in over time because we couldn't get enough people to actually start to care about this? And that means, similar to new tech that we've seen, or kind of going back to the same PGP example, like, it's great to have encryption on email, but if I can't get everybody in the world you can surely assume we'll have an email address, and there's already billions of people, you kind of lost the plot or the argument of, like, hey, well, even though it's cool, it never actually solved the problem here, and that means you've collapsed the possible future that tech could have had.
Well, I will give founder's perspective, so it's a personal opinion. Let's say the problem lies in, like, how do we market and sell our tech with our values combined into a product, so it's more like of a magic, or like startup magic chemistry that happens in the course of years when a startup evolves, finds newer markets, and eventually comes to becoming like a big company. And you can try to build for everyone, like try to solve this problem, but I believe that you will have more pleasure building a product sharing your internal values. Let's say if this is about Web3, censorship resistance, privacy, transparency, or ownership, and all values that we love in the industry. A good example might be Proton Mail. So it's a product about privacy, email, and they sell it. They try to stick to their promises, like 1Password, another example. And I will probably know that there will be a bank or a trading app for a certain audience that like shares some cultural values. So when it becomes more cultural as a movement, if you share the values with your users, this is the strongest retention mechanics you can achieve.
No, that's absolutely fair. And maybe quickly to have Remco, you respond to this statement. Is it fair for you to, in a way, look at this as from the point of view of designing for billion effectively is another way of saying design for scale, if you hit it, versus arbitrary large number of users being the exact metric? And if so, like, do you think that as long as you kind of prove that this is the audience and it works for that scale, you effectively are building for scale and this 1 billion group?
I think it's something you always need to keep in mind. And if I'm truly honest here, we're not even currently, we're building for 1 billion, but we're not there yet. We know our stuff will break down at probably 50 million users. And we're already working on like, hey, what can we do to get to the next level? You have these hurdles that you need to get through every order of magnitude, basically. But it's important to keep this end goal in mind. Because if you don't, you have a chance of painting yourself in the corner. Kind of the most annoying part of working with these extremely decentralized and privacy-preserving primitives is that a lot of you encounter a lot of one-way streets where you make decisions that are very, very hard to undo after you make them. When you, for example, give away control, or when you decide to collect data that you otherwise wouldn't have collected, and so on. And you want to navigate that with a roadmap that ultimately does lead to this 1 billion users. Otherwise, you will hit these problems down the road.
That's fair. I want to get to kind of the closing statements here before we get into the audience questions. So, Vadim, I'll kind of have you make your closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. So, I believe that we reached a point in the industry, as an industry, that is so-called chasm. So we are entering mass adoption. So we are starting to compete with other businesses on efficiency, scale, distribution mechanics, revenue streams. So it's very exciting because while I was in the industry for 8 years or more, it was very pleasant to see that we envisioned like permissionless 24/7 financial markets in 2016 with my friends, and 8 years later, we can trade everything on chain, yield from all over the world. So it's quite a big economy, like by number of TVL users, fees, and GDP generated. Even calculating that 3 GDP is like a very nice research. And after spending quite some time with users, I understood that these Web3 citizens, probably the first million who were in the industry, first million of active users, they were about being self-custodial. So they are very responsible about their lives. They seek alpha. Many of them live in many countries. They are multicultural, they are global. And all these people spend time to build infrastructure, test different applications. And now here we are. And looking forward, we still have a lot of barriers and problems to solve. As Remco mentioned, yeah, probably we still need to see how blockchain works for 50 million people because no one reached yet. We have a lot of block space, but we don't have enough people to fill this. So this time we have another problem. In 2021, we had too many users and too less of block space, so many alt chains appeared. So we're definitely improving. Imagine transacting like 5 years ago and not today. Today, user experience is indistinguishable from like fintech. So you can build it in a way that nobody will, who would imagine that there will be Apple Pay to meme coin startup in 2024. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is something. And it works. So, and people enjoy using it for whatever reasons they need. And probably the next big frontier I see is identity. Because identity is like about reputation, it's on-chain, it's off-chain, and having a self-sovereign identity is a must for us to, let's say, reach network state. And if we'll have social media fully transparent, like global database of news, it will be like probably $1 billion users product. But we still need to get there. So I guess it's the most inspiring and inspiring part to be in the market, because you can experiment quickly and cheaply with any tech on existing infrastructure and just go to customers and sell them your products.
Amazing. And I'll do Remco, your closing statement, and we'll go to audience Q&A after.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to highlight that when there's a need for something, someone will step in and fill it. And that right now there is a big need for identity solutions globally, and that need will be filled. But we don't want it to be filled with something that doesn't capture the things we care about, which is strong self-sovereignty and privacy. If we don't make a push for scale, it will be filled by the likes of Google and Apple. And with solutions that not necessarily leverage all the technology that we've developed within our community. So this is why it is so important to push for scale. Because scale brings a Schelling point. It signals to the world that, hey, this technology is now ready for prime time. It lets all the regulators know that, hey, you can be more demanding towards people, because people building things have the tools to solve it better than they're currently doing. And it also creates a Schelling point for talent, because now people can get into the space. They've heard of it. They know that they can join this project, or maybe another, and work on these principles. So you get a much stronger ecosystem as a result of being larger. It is self-reinforcing in this sense. And coming to the point of kind of finding grassroots fits, this surprisingly happens at scale really, really well. If you have a global network of users and you have like people on the ground nearly everywhere, they will bubble up anything where like, hey, here is a niche that an adaptation of this solution or whatever would be particularly valuable. And then you already have the people there that would be able to take that and bring it to production. So these advantages of scale. The other thing, very important to remember that I don't think we've covered enough yet, is network effect. Yes, GNU PGP still exists and you can still use it today. However, you will not be emailing with anyone who uses it. You will still be receiving plain text emails from your bank. And this is simply because it is not capturing the network effect. All these things become much more valuable the more people use it. Proton and Tornado Cache now have a bad stigma to them, because they are mostly used by the people who depend strongly on the properties they provide, and they have the stigma of those kinds of user segments. Whereas if this was something that was brought to scale and broadly adopted, It would just be accepted as core part of the infrastructure, just like you use HTTPS today. Like, no one considers it shady if you browse the web encrypted. This is just commonplace now. And we should strive to make all these things commonplace and make them broadly adopted.
Amazing. Those were two amazing arguments for 1 million versus 1 billion. And with that, let's go into audience Q&A. Already have a question in the back.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts, and thanks for the great moderation. I was just curious why a lot of the mass adoption conversations are focused on account abstraction, consumer apps, but not so much about regulation, because adoption in different countries means different things. Right now, a lot of people are celebrating the election of a party in the US that seems to accept crypto more. I'm curious to see how you view working with regulators in different countries. When we talk about network effects, there's atomic networks, like the way Uber was able to dominate different markets. They had these representatives that were aggressively, spreading their product in that particular region, and that comes with its own risks, its own opportunities, requires a lot of deep understanding of that country. And so I don't know what you think about helping people actually use crypto day to day. Personally, when I bought my first crypto, it was from a shady guy in a shady cafe, because I can't use my Tunisian bank account to buy crypto. So that's pretty much my only way to get crypto. So is it going to be like that for a long time? Like, what do you think? What does it take to actually address mass adoption from that sense, that aspect? Thank you.
Who's going to answer?
Well, so
I think it's open for all.
for the on-ramps, more and more countries start to accept or some local networks, so it's progressing. It was way harder to buy crypto 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, so every year it becomes simpler and simpler. There is even becoming less shady peer-to-peer exchanges based on ZK proofs, etc. So we will get there. My first experience buying crypto was like registering on a shady exchange, trying to use a card, like 10% commission on the cards and like huge spread. So it wasn't like pleasant either. So I know how it feels for the first time. But with regulations, when you're self-custodial, so you're providing a software that holds private keys that is owned by a user, and you don't cross the borderlines of traditional fintech and finances, you can more or less freely operate. So there was like, I guess, no countries in the world who banned self-custodial wallets. So this is...
They've tried.
They tried, but there is no good solution. You can't tell your people in your country you can't own crypto. It will be just like 12 words on a paper. That's it. So,
Ramke, if you want to add, yeah.
Yeah, so the account abstraction, actually, I think the emphasis there is really good, because if you don't have that, then the default is that users manage their own private keys, and the best thing we have there is write down 24 words on a piece of paper and never ever lose it. We need to get away from that, because that is naive and that's not going to scale to non-native crypto users. Account abstraction is a way to put this decision back in the user's hand and let the user decide how they want to protect their account. So I think that's absolutely a good direction here, and we need to see a lot more innovation happening. The second question on interaction with the regulators. Well, the World Foundation has, I think, 5 lawyers for every engineer it has. So we do this a lot. And the reason we do this is because we are at the scale where we actually get their attention and they are willing to sit with us around the table and we get to explain them all these exciting, cool things that happen in zero-knowledge cryptography and so on. And they do actually get it. Regulators are ultimately out there to build a better world, just like we are. And we do need to find this common ground and make them aware of what is possible, and also listen to their concern, and integrate that in the solutions we build.
There's also a second question at the back.
Hi, thanks very much for this great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I must say I didn't come as a world fan, but I have to admit that I agree to almost any argument Remchi made. So my question is, I almost see that Vadim representing one tribe in Crypto Remco, another one, and these two, I don't know, are not very aligned, maybe different personalities, I don't know. When I look back in 2017-18, we saw much more projects in trying to solve real-world problems, whereas today I feel at DEF CON there is so much about sophisticated infrastructure and not solving hard problems. It decreased, and we should have taken the other route, because I totally agree there is a need out there, as so many needs, so many problems to be solved. Somebody will solve it. Why not us, if we have such a strong vision in crypto? Now my question goes to Remco. What would you say from your experience at WorldCoin? How could crypto conferences, maybe like DEF CON, go back to this, let's solve hard problems? What are we missing to bring visibility to both tribes, the sophisticated infrastructure tech and the solving hard problems tribe?
Yeah, no, I understand this dichotomy that you see there. I kind of call them the Berlin tribe and the San Francisco tribe, because I lived in both places, Berlin in the early days of crypto.
That's a really good way to...
And I absolutely love both. And I see it as my role to kind of try and build the bridge there, because they really can benefit from each other in very powerful ways. And I think that is also what we need to do. I think that's why I like something like Devconflict, where you actually do this and have this interaction. I think Protocol Berg was also a very interesting conference in Berlin, where there was also like a little bit this tension going on between how do we navigate the needs of the larger world while maintaining truth to these ideals that we find so important.
All right, give it up for our speakers. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
We're going to vote one more
Oh,
time,
right.
so don't go anywhere. Be it resolved, blockchain platforms should prioritize mainstream over crypto-native users. So to recap, we had a great poll the first time, so I just want to repeat it to you because we had a tie. We had a tie between agree and abstain. So we had 10 voters agreeing and 10 voters abstaining, and we had 7 disagree. This time, someone was very persuasive. Last call. Anyone else out there? Okay. We have a majority voting in the agree category. So 16 in the agree category, 7 in disagree, and 5 in the abstain category. Thank you so much for our speakers. Stick around. We have the last debate in 1 hour, and that is a debate about MEV. Should MEV be tackled at the application layer or protocol level? So we'll see you in 1 hour. Thank you.